Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karin Feipel. I'm the chair of ELA, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this conference on 21st century leadership in strategic sustainability thinking. We're here in a beautiful setting at Lux Expo, very nicely set up for us, and I'm here today together with Mrs. Carol Dieschburg, who is the Minister of Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development, as well as with Raymond Chadec, our former chair of ELA and chairman of our working group on sustainable strategies for boards. We're here, seated at a safe distance from each other, and very pleased to have you with us on this webinar. Yesterday, a well-known daily online magazine published an article which was entitled Le Plan Climat, élément clé de la relance économique. So the article was focusing on the National Energy and Climate Plan, which foresees a reduction of CO2 emissions, an increase in the use of renewable energy, and the promotion of environmentally friendly buildings. So the article was saying how the Luxembourg Energy and Climate Plan will be a key element in the recovery of the national economy following the current COVID-19 crisis. One can obviously politically agree or disagree with the plan. Some will say it's too prescriptive, while others will say it doesn't go far enough. But there certainly is a consensus that something needs to be done to address the climate crisis. And hence, companies will need to adapt the way they do business, which means that they will need to adapt their strategies, taking into consideration and account the challenges of addressing climate crisis, but also the other aspects of sustainable development. And when we speak about strategy, we obviously speak about the boards of directors, because the board is the corporate body that defines a strategy in a company. For that reason, sustainability has been a key focus for ELA for the past few years. We have set up a dedicated working group, as I said, which is chaired by Raymond Chadec, on the sustainability strategies for boards. Why? Because it is important that we help our members understand the importance of sustainability and to embed sustainability in their strategies. On that basis, we have designed a training program to help members on leadership in sustainability strategies. Together with Professor Dr. Ravi Fernando, who, as you probably know, is an expert on sustainability strategic thinking. But more about that training program later. Now I will hand over to Mrs. Carol Dieschburg, as I said, the Minister of Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development in Luxembourg. She will talk to us about the Energy and Climate Plan of the Luxembourg government, with a specific focus on the opportunities for local companies. After that presentation, we will have a Q&A, which Raymond Chadec will moderate, and for that I invite you to put in your questions through the chat function in the Zoom, and we will then be addressing those questions later on. After the Q&A, Professor Fernando will give a brief presentation on the 21st century board leadership model, and after that I will shortly introduce our training program that we have designed and that we will start in the fall. But now, I hand the mic to Mrs. Dieschburg.
Thank you, Mrs. Karin Feipel. Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, Raymond Chadec. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to share some of the experiences together and also to answer some questions, because we are at a crucial moment in time. We are facing an unprecedented crisis with unprecedented answers, a health crisis. And all the crises that we hear about and that we know about, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, pollution, and health crisis we face at the moment, they are very closely interlinked. And Karin, you mentioned we need a systemic change. We need a new economic model. And I'm sure that all those outside here listening to us already have some of the answers and solutions, because most of the things I've seen over the last year during climate negotiations, during the international experience in all those COPs and party meetings, they show that the solutions is there. Technology is ready. We are creative enough to recreate the world, to rebuild better from this crisis. The challenge we now have is to combine this in a very holistic way and to find solutions to all those crises we face in one time. That's why Pierre Gramegna, Claude Turmes, Franz Fayo, and I immediately, after a call from Pascal Canfin, a European parliamentarian, agreed to sign a call of ministers, parliamentarians, economic actors, civil societies, and NGOs to put the Green Deal at the core of the recovery plans, because it's of utmost importance to invest into the right direction, to be competitive for the future at the European level or the national level. And that's why we also see as a government our climate and energy plan, which was also running through the public consultation in March. And the government took the decision to take this plan during this crisis, because we think that we have to combine those ideas and to create opportunities to increase and to accelerate the transition towards a healthy, a resilient world. And I think this is what we are all fighting for. We all see that we have to change, but I think most of you already have seen that there are many opportunities. Because if you speak about change, you also speak about new investment opportunities. You also speak about big investments. Because if we want to change everything, we have to rebuild everything. We have to rebuild our houses. We have to rebuild public infrastructure. We are investing in Luxembourg at the moment as much in public transportation as we did never before. So basically, what we have done in this climate and energy plan is to work as well on a sectorial level as also to mention finance. So you mentioned already that we have to reduce by 2030 55% of our CO2 emissions, which is a big challenge. But this means also, and we already took some decision for the recovery plan, we said we're going to enable people to accelerate their transition at home. So we decided to scale up the subsidies in housing. For instance, if you replace your old fossil heating system by a new one, you can get until 81% of the costs subsidized by Luxembourgish government. So I think this is a fair chance for everyone to change a polluting heating system based on fossil energy by producing yourself your own energy based on renewables, your own heating system, by making the transition coming away from mobility, which is polluting city town centers, which is taking a lot of place, by changing and going, for instance, and buy a bicycle to go to work. We already have 12,000 asks of subsidies already now. During the last months, we see that people just take the chance in order to have a better living quality in the center of our cities, rediscover nature, change their habitudes, having better living quality at home, autonomy for such a small country, for everyone, in production of renewable energy is a big opportunity. So we have civil society and private people who are able to invest. We have local economic players who can do this work. We keep the money here, invest in a sustainable future, and so by doing this, we can all be actors of change. By being actors of change, I think we need to see that we are not going to solve the problems the way they have been created. It's Einstein who already said this. So we need creativity, flexibility, look into new materials. We also need, and I think this is what you have in the companies, because I've been in private sector before. I think what is something that we have in common, we have the courage to do things, to take the things, to see that there are crises and choose the opportunities to change. So courage also in change management, courage to ask, what did I already do? Am I transparent? Am I making sustainability checks in my system? What are the first step or the second or the third to take in order to be more sustainable? We also, I think, need pioneer spirit. Because, and earlier on I spoke about competitiveness. Competitiveness means that as sooner, as earlier we adopt new legislative files, as the better it is for the competitiveness of your company. So I think if you look at the recent actions, for instance, on the finance sector, I may mention the stock exchange, for instance, with the green exchange being a front runner, Luxembourg together with the finance ministry, with civil society, we had a sustainable finance roadmap. We have been pioneering on this. So Luxembourg already has a big ecosystem if it comes to sustainable finance. And I had a meeting this morning with the finance minister in order to take the next steps if it comes to implementation of the sustainable finance roadmap, the Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative, where we will coordinate the next steps in order to keep this pioneering spirit, to be the front runners if it comes to sustainability in the finance sector. Because we also have to think that we have, if we recreate, if we have, for instance, circular economy, we need new calculation models. This means that we have to change really everything. So basically, I think this is the most important message that I wanted to give is don't be afraid of choosing new ways. And for me, the most important thing, why did we get a success in Paris? Because of partnerships. It was civil society, politics, science, and economic actors who have been leading the way through the Paris negotiations. That's why we have the Paris Agreement today. So I'm deeply convinced that beneath all the plans that governments can do, we need economic actors. So I stopped with energy, mobility, housing. Maybe I may mention as a part of the plan and a strategy that the government also agreed on, it's the zero waste strategy, going into a circular economy, which is a joker if we speak about reaching the climate goals. And the last point to mention, to come back to our climate and energy plan, is agriculture. We also have to take care how we produce, how we consume, and it's a choice of every day. Because in every company, you need water for the people who work in the company, you need to see what will be consumed over the day. So lots of initiatives already are running in Luxembourg. We have more than 60 companies already, or economic players already now, working for zero plastics in their own society. So it's a huge dynamic that I see on the sector. So what we want as a government is to work this plan together with you, together with everyone, in order to accelerate a transition to a resilient world and to invest into the right direction in order not to have stranded assets. Because if we invest in fossils, in a very old model, we won't have enough money, and we will have stranded assets, and we won't have enough money for the future, which needs to be climate friendly, sustainable, which needs to be just. So I think we have lots of opportunities to invest in the right direction. We have a lot of opportunities if you look at all those plans, and we are ready to do this with you. And I hope that I gave you some inside views. And now I think the most important for the people outside is really to ask questions on these plans, how we see this, and maybe the climate and energy plan is just one plan in all those discussions that we are running at the moment. We are working together with Finance Ministry, as I mentioned, for the finance sector. We are also working together with the Economy Ministry in order to, for instance, make the shift towards a circular economy and develop the new opportunity in this area, so a service-oriented economic model. And I think all those, for every one of you, in every single society, we need to develop new answers. So I think solutions are ready, people are ready, government is ready, and with that I finish, and thank you for the attention.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to add one point is that Minister Dischbusch is living her talks, because on Twitter and on LinkedIn you can see nice photos with when she was biking to Luxembourg today. Okay, but we have some interesting questions already, and the first question is from Claude, who refers to the Sustainable Finance Roadmap. By saying the transition we want to do is not possible with only public money. We also need private money. So we have developed this Sustainable Finance Roadmap, and the question is, where do we stand, and what are the next steps?
Okay, yes, so indeed, private money will be needed, because it's public money won't be enough in order to make the shift. That's why we created in February of this year, was created a public-private entity called Luxembourg Sustainable Finance Initiative. We will have a new director. Actually, next month she will start working, and so the work of this entity will be to coordinate all the actions that we have now, to create and put into reality the sustainable finance roadmap, and create a strategy which has to be then put into reality, and also to focus, for instance, on capacity building, because a lot of the initiatives that have been taken during the last years, they have, we see that they are very excellent showcases how we can, for instance, scale up public money with private money. If you look at the Climate and Forestry Fund that was created during the last years, where we do very good projects on on wood protection and circular economy for some of the regions. There we scaled up, we managed to have private actors on board. So it's by showcasing that it's possible to have private actors on board, and that's why we want to put into life the Sustainable Finance Roadmap, where the next steps will be taken very soon. So I'm very happy that we had the courage to create this public-private entity, which will give life to what we decided on in the government already in end of 2018.
Thank you. Next question is from Jane, who is asking the question, does the Luxembourg government have the objective to go as far as Denmark did on the climate law?
So I'm very often in contact with my minister colleague Dan from Denmark, and indeed they scaled up already quite a lot during the last months. Luxembourg also did. In our climate law, what is important is that we have the right framework in order to work in coordination together. so that we have a sectorial approach, that every sector, from building, energy, industry, and agriculture, every sector will have its part to do, but in a differentiated manner, and that we create the framework to bring together people. So in our climate law, there will be a platform analyzing, asking questions, but also giving some incentives for us as government. What can be done more? So it's a question about a framework. What objectives do we want to have? So first of all, a reduction target of 55% of CO2 reductions calculated from 2005. Secondly, adapt to the climate change. Third, reorient the finance flows. So these are the three objectives of the Paris Agreement, where we are in line with, if you look at the objectives of the climate law. And secondly, how do we put this, how we bring this on the ground? How will we put this into reality? And that's the way how we work with sectorial approach, a whole government approach, and having everyone on board. And in order to finance this well, we also have passages about the climate fund, because we also in the future, we want to invest into the right direction. We want to give subsidies to people to accelerate what we can do together. And we also have to see how much we can, for instance, de-risk some of the very innovative things that we see outside. So basically, I do not know if Denmark is going far beyond. That's the way how we plan the transition, and I can tell you that we plan it with everyone on board.
I have a follow-up question on that one, which I guess many of us have is, yes, we are aware, or some of us are aware in their specific sectors about this sectorial approach. Don't we, with the present crisis and with the present liquidity issues many companies have the risk that for them it is easier to go back to normal, which means before, and that all these sustainable development discussions will not be a priority anymore going forward?
So I hope not. As a government, we decided to say, okay, we have to use this crisis and seize the opportunity to accelerate transition. So I think that every single one of us has seen how we can push digitalization, that we are able to change, and that we are able to show solidarity and respect each other. So I guess for the other crises, that's the same. We have to take data-based decisions. We have to follow science. If we do this, we see that we cannot put climate crisis aside of our thinking. So basically, I don't think it's a back to normal, because at the moment, I don't see the back to normal on the streets. And I see that lots of people realized that we rely on nature, on healthy and good living quality. So basically, yes, maybe we have some of the people doubting if we can do this, but I'm convinced that we are able to seize this opportunity to change together.
I think this is exactly the discussion why we sit here today and why ILA has decided to develop with Professor Fernando this program. Because what we realize is that, yes, the politicians say let's accelerate, and there is obviously good reasons to do that. The citizen is sensitized more than before, but the problem we see is mainly the small and medium-sized companies are struggling to make it their priority in this case. So sorry to come back with a similar question, but would love to have your answer on that one.
Yes, so we try to really give incentives, for instance, for the small and medium-sized economic actors if it comes to the building sector, for instance, where we try to create opportunities for a lot of people, so for everyone living in Luxembourg. We also try to give the incentives into the right direction by, for instance, leading by example. If we, as a government, decide to invest a lot into efficient building, into also high standard of building. This means also that lots of companies do have chances to show what they are able to do. We, in the last years, developed, for instance, a wood cluster together with the actors on the ground, on the floor, with economic actors, in order to see, okay, we can work far more in circular thinking by not exporting the wood into other countries, but creating added value here. And the question now is, if we create the added value here, if we invest in our own solar powers, if we invest into wind energy, if we invest into healthy but also efficient and climate-friendly buildings, this means that it's creating a lot of jobs. We made a study on circular economy already in 2014 as a government together with the Economic Ministry, and this study showed that there were much more job opportunities in Luxembourg because we do not have big resources. We do not have fossil fuels. But we do have wind, we do have sun, we do have a lot of people who are working, for instance, at a finance place where we can seize the opportunity to be front-running in sustainability, to create the right ecosystem. So I think there are lots of opportunities. And for instance, if you go for small or medium enterprises in food production, we can create and produce more food used locally. And I think that one of the things that Mouvement Écologique has asked, I think lots of people want to change their habitudes, want to live healthier, want to profit from a good nature outside, from healthy, from better air. So I think lots of opportunities are outside, and lots of small and medium economic actors working on in all those areas can also see this as an opportunity to innovate. And I think with all the help that the government gave through that crisis, we also want to invest into innovation. We try to have a package also for those who suffered a lot from this crisis, which means, for instance, tourism sector. And I know that there's still a lot of work to do, but we also can choose these opportunities of government helping out lots of different actors outside to innovate. And I think that's the message also which came out yesterday, that we have to show solidarity, but also invest into digitalization, innovation, and that's one of the and climate-friendly solutions. That's the message that also came, one of the messages that also came out yesterday or this morning on the head of states meeting, where they agreed on the package. And the two priorities in somehow are also digitalization and climate. So they are in, so the direction of investment is quite clear. And I think that now it's an opportunity also to check in several areas if we are already ready and future-proof and resilient, because we see how difficult it was, because I didn't think that in Europe it was as difficult to find the protection that we needed, to find the masks that we needed, and we have seen how fragile all these global systems are. So it's also an opportunity to reinvest into industrialization and to reinvest in competitiveness, but on a climate-friendly, non-polluting way.
Thank you. I combine a couple of questions in saying, you were speaking about investments. Obviously, the government is ready to invest a lot, and we have heard it. Okay, how do we avoid, or are there specific actions, how we avoid to paying twice, which means we invest in renewable energies, and at the same moment we still continue to subsidize fossil fuels. What's the strategy on that one? Because the normal citizen does not understand why he would pay twice.
Yes. And of course, this is a discussion that lasts for years and years. And I think environment ministers always try to say, okay, let's try to get out of these harmful subsidies if it comes to agriculture, but also if it comes to, for instance, mobility sector. These are very difficult discussions. but they have to be led. I can't answer you right now on this question, but I can say that we are working in order to phase out, but on the longer term, harmful subsidies. But it's a lot of readjusting. And I think you know that the government also speaks about the green part of the reform during the next years. So this will be discussed at that stage. What can we do in order to be more climate friendly, to invest into the right direction, and to phase out those harmful money in our system? But it's not as easy to solve.
Today, for example, today, how big a percentage do we use renewable energies in Luxembourg? Mm-hmm. And the combined question too is, how much of our transport is sustainable?
Yes, of course. These are the big questions. So we are getting, so until 2020, we will have 11% of, so until end of the year, we will reach the goal of the 11% of renewables. And indeed, we are trying to do our best to scale up as fast as possible. But if you look on an international, so 11%, this doesn't seem a lot, but this is due to the energy that we consume, and a big part of the energy that we consume, and you mentioned mobility, also has to do with fossil sales. So mobility sector as a sector is responsible for 68% of the CO2 emissions in Luxembourg. So this is the biggest sector. Normally in Europe, it's about 20% of the CO2 emissions. So what we did during the last years, maybe to answer a part of your question, is we tried, first of all, to reorient the investments. 2/3 of the public money nowadays goes to soft and active mobility and to public transportation. Before, it was exactly the opposite. So today, 2/3 of the public money goes into the right direction. We also, so everyone can take the public transportation now because we have gratuity. And I think the other part of it is we have, in the government, decided to follow the fuel sales very closely. So during the crisis, we also had a slowing down of the economies and also had a slowing down of fuel sales during this crisis, so that we will be able to reach our climate goals. But we will follow this closely after on. And monitor very closely how this impacts the climate budget that we have, but also the budget that's inside. So that's why the finance minister is in, Frans Faiyot is in, Claude Thomas and I. So we are discussing this very closely and following what to do in order to reduce the fuel sales and to reduce over a longer period our dependency on those sales, because this is a part of the budget. So we have to really also, in the government, plan this very step by step and together. So basically, and then the second part of it, investing into the right direction, stepping out of the fuel sales, and then of course, electromobility, decarbonized mobility by giving incentives is a part of the strategy too, and that's why we also have, as a part of the program, the recovery program, the new subsidies if it comes to electric cars, where you get 8,000 euro if you now buy an electric car, which is quite a lot of money. So we also tried to give the incentive into decarbonizing private mobility.
Thank you. A question from Jane, important question, is if we speak about sustainability, we speak about mindset. Mm-hmm. What's the strategy of the Luxembourg government to bring sustainability into education?
Okay. During last year, we have seen lots of students on the streets. So our spontaneous reaction was Roman Schneider and I went to all the schools. So we went to 5 schools during last year and had a climate exchange. And we organized during last autumn the first sustainability fair, especially dedicated to education people. So to the trainers, to the people working in educations, in order to bring all actors together. So we had an occasion to have the NGO sector in, but also very nice examples of sustainabilities in different schools. Because we already have a lot of students who invested a lot of their thinking, for instance, in reducing the bottles used in the school buildings, where we had some schools who had very active students who managed to reduce already more than half of them. And we had several very good projects. One part of education for sustainability means also, and there we work together with education, means that we are not only training the trainers and the teachers, but we also have, for instance, together with Youth for Planet project, in order to how to communicate about sustainability, how to make visible what is not visible for us. For instance, how do we live? So very crucial question. What can I do as a student in Luxembourg in order to be more sustainable and reduce my footprint? So it's beginning by the very morning, get up, take the choice of what I eat, how to get to school, how to behave. So it's about very practical questions, what everyone can do, that has been developed during the last years. And last point, it's not stopping in schools. We also, during the last months, worked a lot in how to, for instance, make capacity building in the finance sector. Yes. We also are working together with the university, and I hope we can go in public soon, because I think that it's also making the connection between lifelong learning and education in schools. So we try to really have an overall picture, because you don't stop learning if you go out of school.
A question which is perhaps related, but which is coming from José, who is, when you were speaking about the climate plan of Denmark, you were referring to partnerships with Denmark, etc. Have we considered partnerships with Canada, or more specifically Quebec, who is very well advanced in some of these points?
Honestly, no. At the moment, we haven't foreseen a partnership with Canada and Quebec, but it would be interesting. So we are always interested in an exchange of good practices. That's why we also, for instance, work with region in the United States of America, for instance, where we have an MOU together with the Netherlands and some other countries with regions in the US, because it's not only Trump, but we also have regional levels. So basically, what we tried to do over the last years during the climate conferences is establish good way of exchange of best practices over the world. But if there are incentives into that direction, or ideas what could be done more together, we are very open to get into touch with people who want to share good experiences.
Thank you. Before I get to my last question, a very specific question from Hugo. The 80% subsidy, okay, for renewable energy at home, how long will it last?
Yes, this is clearly defined, because it's a very special just recovery package measure. It will last until every engagement taken until the March 21. So you have to make your choice quickly. But for instance, if it comes to the building sector, the renovation can be done until a year later, or by the end of the year, because we know that some of the projects, especially the bigger ones, if you decide to renovate the whole of a house, you won't be ready in March. So it's important that you take the decision and you make the deal before end of March 21.
Before handing over to Karin again, last one, what messages would you have for members of board of directors of small and medium-sized companies in Luxembourg? To first, in this difficult moment, okay, be part of the transition, or as you say, be part of the solution and not part of the pollution.
Yes, of course, be part of the solution, or maybe everyone wants to be on the good side of history. Everyone wants to be a hero in his life, and I may then maybe quote Bertrand Piccard, who made his travel around the world, and he said that the 21st century heroes will be people who will improve quality of life, fight poverty, and introduce more sustainability. And I think these 3 points are crucial for us as a society. So I think everyone wants to be a hero, so be courageous enough to be a hero of your own story. You have it in your own hands, what you do in your daily life, in your companies, together with the people working for you. So by taking the decision to live and invest climate friendly, I think you will not only be heroes, but you will be pioneering, and this is good for competitiveness.
Thank you very much, Minister Dischbusch. With that, I hand it over to Karin, which I think will give it over to Ravi, okay, to really give his message to the Board of Directors members.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Mrs. Dischburg, and thank you, Raymond. I think it was a very interesting session, and I very much enjoyed the questions and answers on a very timely topic, but also a topic that will be with us for a very long time, and probably for our future altogether. I will hand over now to Professor Fernando, who joins us from Sri Lanka. That's the beauty of being online. And he will talk to us about what a 21st century leader should be, obviously in an environment of sustainable development, and how important that is for board members. And then obviously, that will be an introduction to our upcoming training program that we will thereafter briefly present to you. So over to you, Professor.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And let me start by saying a word of encouragement that I get listening to the Honorable Minister for Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development of Luxembourg. It is not always that we hear political leaders being able to articulate sustainability in the way she did. So congratulations. And I think Luxembourg is already off to a great start if we have people of that stature leading the sustainability effort. I also want to acknowledge the President, the current chairman and past chairman of ELA. And I must say that ELA has been always embracing the future, and this program that we are talking about is very much a part of it. Today, the European Union has signed a 750 billion euro stimulus package, and I believe that this is a very important package that is going to help Europe basically drive the post-COVID green recovery of the world. And I believe that Luxembourg is well positioned to be a shining star in driving the green recovery in terms of using the money that's coming mainly for the climate and greening of the renewable energy strategy. So let me start my presentation today in terms of the slides, and I look forward to seeing the first slide on the screen. Team Lux Expo.
It's there. You can go.
Okay, great. So today I want to talk a little about 21st century board leadership model, and in terms of how this model really came to being. By and large, during the COVID period, I was able to read up a very interesting book, and we can get to the next slide. Team Luxembourg. Okay, so we have already heard of the challenges the world faces, especially the global risks that have been identified in the Global Risk Report, which was presented at the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to just focus on two major risks, which is the first one, which is extreme weather, and the second one, climate action failure. Extreme weather incidents in the world have increased from about 150 incidents per annum to nearly 700 incidents per annum. Number two, this is now creating a massive inflection in terms of global warming, because in the last 20 years, 19 years have been the hottest ever recorded on the planet, and every year has been hotter than the year before. And if we look at what is happening even in the Arctic, the North Pole, we have seen temperatures rise to 37 degrees centigrade. And this is completely off the charts. This is the first time in the planet we have seen such high temperatures, which obviously is going to lead to the polar caps beginning to melt. And even the South Pole, we can see the figures were pretty much off the charts. Now, the second key risk that the world is talking about is climate action failure. And whose climate action failure are we talking about? Because the first time climate action was initiated in the world in terms of a United Nations driven project was in 1987, when Our Common Future was published by the United Nations to look at how the climate was beginning to change and environmental sustainability was in jeopardy. By 1992, we had the first Rio conference. And at the Earth Summit, everyone committed to making massive changes to move away from fossil fuels, which is by and large the cause of extreme weather incidents and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is nearly 76% cause in terms of extreme weather incidents. So the climate action failure is stemming very much from leadership in terms of national leadership and in terms of business leadership. And I am convinced that both these sectors of political leaders, national leaders, and business leaders have to work together for us to move forward and move away from the failures we have had so far. The Paris Agreement was an important moment in 2015 December, where most countries committed to their NDCs, the nationally determined commitments. However, when one looks at the figures as at 2020, we are really looking at a 67% of the targets that should have been achieved by 2020. So we have climate action failure looming at us, but let's get confident, let's move forward. And when one looks at these risks, one of the things that happened over the COVID period for me was I was able to read an extremely important book, which inspired me to create the business model that I have created. So we can move to the next slide. So this book is titled 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And as I read this book, it was very clear to me that all 21 lessons could be encapsulated in a business model that could be talking to board leaders and even national leaders. And just to take one or two quotes from that book, and one of the first comments made here, for thousands of years, Homo sapiens behaved as an ecological serial killer. Now, it's morphing into an ecological mass murderer. And it also says, because we didn't understand the complexity of the ecology system, the changes we made inadvertently disrupted the entire ecological system, and now we face an ecological collapse. And this is very clearly what I have already mentioned in terms of the 5 key global risks, because we are talking of extreme weather coming in and beginning to impact everything that we do. Now we move on to the next slide, which is basically to the start of what I would call a 21st century board leader or a national leader. I believe there are 2 significant imperatives that are an absolute must for us to move forward. The first one is we need to have a science appreciating, science-led mindset in terms of both national leaders and business leaders. And I can see the minister is clearly in that mindset. But we need board leaders also to at least appreciate and have an appreciation for a science mindset. The second one is a triple bottom line mindset, which must pervade the thinking. And if you don't have a science mindset, you will never have a triple bottom line mindset, because you will wonder why we need a triple bottom line mindset. It's only a science mindset which basically will help us understand that a triple bottom line mindset, where we look at economic growth, but not just economic growth, sustainable economic growth, to be achieved by managing environmental sustainability and resources in an extremely stewardship-oriented manner, but yet contributing to the social progress of the nation and the social progress of the people working in companies. So these to me are the 2 imperatives, and the image I have put here is one of Elon Musk, who I believe fully epitomizes both these important imperatives. Number 1, here we have a leader who is actually a PhD in science from the University of Pennsylvania, having done a degree in physics. So there's no question about his science mindset. However, what is greatly appreciated is how he has turned the science mindset into not just a science mindset, but he has turned it into a business strategy, because all his businesses are pretty much focused on delivering economic profits, but doing so in a sustainable way. If we look at a simple example of Tesla, the motor company, it has 3 gigafactories in the world today, 1 in Nevada, 1 in Berlin that is coming up, and 1 in Shanghai. They are all 100% powered by solar energy, by renewable energy and batteries. And this is the game changer, when renewable energy plus batteries are a key game changer. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, so now I want to introduce all of you to what I would title a 21st century board leadership model, which was influenced very much by the 21 lessons for the 21st century book by Yuval Harari. And the key points I want to make before I go into the model is, number 1, the INSEAD Business School just concluded a board survey between January and March. And I'm going to give you 3 key statistics that came out of that survey which are relevant to this model. Number 1, it showed us that over 66% of board directors who were interviewed did not fully understand the impact of climate change on their business strategies. It's only 34% who knew about it. Number 2, in terms of geopolitical impact on business strategy, 49% were not aware of how geopolitics can impact a business strategy. And third and finally, business disruption. In this model, I talk about technology-led business disruption and geopolitical-led business disruption. And the figure is that 53% of the board directors interviewed did not fully understand how this would happen. So this is a very timely program that Eli is about to launch. So let me take you through this model. At the top of the model are the triple bottom line elements of economic, environmental, and social sustainability. we can talk of it as profit, planet, and people. In this model, what we are going to be talking about is an extremely focused solution in terms of every business understanding that the cause of the climate emergency is coming very much from the burning of fossil fuels. And in terms of a future economic and environmental strategy, the model will look at how businesses can move towards a business model that is moving towards a renewable energy 100 company. So REN 100 is a program that is on today in the world, and many companies have signed up to this. And when we look at some of the amazing nation companies like Google, like Apple, like Microsoft, they have already migrated towards the commitment to become a REN 100 company. And the main focus of the environmental model and the economic model will be to create new business models that are renewable energy driven, and how companies can move towards that quite rapidly and with clear examples of what can be done at each stage. Because we need to see us moving towards models, business models. And the most important element in terms of economic sustainability for both nations and businesses is to have a business model for businesses and a economic growth model for nations, which are pretty much driven from a REN 100 perspective and aggressively moving towards REN 100 in terms of climate emergency and economic business modeling. The third element is in terms of social sustainability. And that's the third element on the model. The clear fact that the health emergency COVID-19 disrupted clearly the world is absolute evidence that we need to be very conscious in terms of future health emergencies. And let me start by saying the COVID-19 emergency has not gone away. It is very much with us. It is only when we have a proven vaccine out there, which is now beginning to be mass mobilized, can we even begin to think about the concept of going back to life as it was. And I don't think life will ever get back to what it was. Every company on the planet, every nation on the planet, we must understand the health emergency is as a result of national leaders and business leaders in the last 33 years since the 1987 book, ignoring, in most cases, the climate emergency. When you ignore the climate emergency and when you then deforest 70% of the world's forest cover, you will end up with pandemics because most of these animals are ending up in wet markets. So the health emergency requires every business to have what I would call a code red strategy. A code red strategy is a strategy that addresses how we can, in each of our companies, have a fallback situation for future pandemics and manage them. But we must also contribute to the social progress of the people in the country and also the social progress of every single employee in the business. These are the triple bottom line mindset model areas. Now we come to the disruption models. Number one, disruption is clearly going to be new technology. We can see company after company, nation after nation is going to be disrupted if we don't have an open mindset to the new technologies that are out there. As you know, one of my previous roles has been heading a nanotechnology company. And I can tell you, nanotechnology is going to be a game changer, and understanding especially how nanotechnology can come in and help us by using much less resources to achieve greater impact is going to be a key element of nanotechnology. The second key element of any nanotechnology business model is to mobilize artificial intelligence in every business strategy in the world. We cannot ever have a situation that we cannot ignore artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is going to make every business, every nation that much more speedier in our responses. Now I want to move into the geopolitical model. When we look at geopolitical impact, and when we look at how nations handled the climate, the health emergency, we see two sets of nations. On one side, we see a set of nations like the USA and Brazil especially, who basically had massive issues in terms of how they handled the climate emergency and the health emergency. At the same time, we have nations like South Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, and even we can see that these countries have done an excellent job in managing the COVID-19 crisis. So what is the difference? The difference is leadership, ladies and gentlemen. The leadership of the United States and Brazil in terms of how they handle this crisis, and the leadership of New Zealand and South Korea and Taiwan and Vietnam, and how they handle the crisis. So geopolitics is going to impact nations, impact economies, and impact business strategy. The other key geopolitical issue that will impact all businesses is how the China-US trade war is resolved. And we can see at the moment there's very little hope of this resolution. And businesses must understand that having corporate strategies or national economic strategies which don't take into account the potential of geopolitics to disrupt them will find themselves in serious trouble when it does happen. And we are going to look at how to advance this area and manage it. The last element in terms of the model, which at the bottom of our chart, is governance. So I want to share with you today a new paradigm for managing governance. In terms of governance, the key element will be, are we in our business model or our national growth model ensuring that we don't put profit before the planet? That is the key element that we are going to build into the strategy of our 21st century board leadership strategy. So what I have done quite rapidly is to take you through this model that we will move into a webinar series, and Karin will talk about it a little later. But I want to move into my next slide very quickly, the final slide that I have. So what this program is aiming to do is to create a future-ready 21st century board member, for that matter, a future-ready 21st century national leader. What we will do in this program is help you understand how to create a board or national response strategy to the three emergencies I talked about: the climate emergency, the health emergency, the social emergency, and the resulting economic emergency. Economic emergencies don't happen on its own. They happen when we ignore a climate and health emergency. We will also look at how to build new technology strategies and to respond and to be clearly aware of the potential of geopolitics to disrupt our business strategies. Lastly, we will look at governance in terms of ensuring that we do not compromise the planet for profit in either sectors. We also need to realize that no business entity, no nation can handle these matters on their own. And we need to set up board and national advisory committees to help us navigate the 21st century, because the 21st century will need certain expertise, especially in technology and geopolitical and climate issues, to advise boards in the future. We are looking at every single one of you who come onto this program, ending the program with a 21st century board leadership strategy for your company or for your nation. That is our commitment. And with that, I want to hand you back to Karin, who will talk about the program. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Fernando. I think this was very inspiring and explains very well what the content of our training program is intended to be. So I will not now go into the further details of the program, but if we move to, we have just a couple of slides on the program. So here you see the 7 topics that we will cover. We will cover these, and they are based on the model that Professor Fernando just explained. And so we will cover those in 7 separate modules. Now, obviously, we would have liked to do this in a room with the participants, but considering the current situation and the expectation that, as we just heard, this might drag on for some more time, we have decided to do this in a webinar formula. So there will be 7 sessions of 2 hours each, and each session will address one of the 7 topics that you see here. Moving then to the next slide, just on some practicalities around the program. So every session will include, obviously, a presentation, a discussion of the topic at hand, but also a panel discussion with a Luxembourg professional expert in that field, and who will bring maybe a local flavor to the topic and also a practical Luxembourg opinion on the topic discussed. And then obviously a Q&A with the participants to discuss and have an exchange on the topic at hand. Every participant will be encouraged to develop a 21st century board leadership strategy for a company on the board of which they sit, or just an imaginary company. And that strategy will then receive input from Professor Fernando and Raymond Chadec as the leaders of the program. We will launch the program in September. So there will be 7 dates for the 2 hours each sessions, and we expect to finish that in November for this first program of this new training. You will find all information about the training on our website, obviously, and registrations will be open as of tomorrow. There will be a limited number of seats available, obviously, because we want to encourage that discussion amongst the participants. So first come, first serve. With that, I would like to close today's conference. I would like to thank our participants. Mrs. Diesburg first, thank you very much for your time, for being with us, for your insights. Professor Fernando, obviously always very inspiring for all of us. And then Raymond Chadec for mastering the Q&A and the unexpected questions of all of you. And of course, thank our host, Lux Expo, the team behind the scenes that you don't see, but they're numerous out here in, as I said at the beginning, a beautiful setting that they have set up here to address the current challenges of being comfortable, having the right technology, and being in a safe environment. So just to close and go back to what Mrs. Diesburg said on quoting Bertrand Piccard, I would encourage you all to be courageous and to help your boards and companies to be heroes in addressing sustainable developments. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a very good summer.